Hi everybody, welcome back. My name is Relay Master Jonathan Blackburn. I'm here to do a second video about pins. It's been a bit of a while since the first one, and really the point of this video today is just to kind of answer some of those extra little questions that you might have about pins. You might have been trying them out in your games and they may not have quite worked or something like that. So today's video is going to be about what kind of awkwardness can pins create and how to actually pin pieces. First position that we're going to be looking at here is a position which has already been declared a draw. You can't possibly checkmate with the king and bishop, so the game would actually end at this point. There's just more to prove a point really, and it's white to play and pin black's piece here. And it's quite interesting because the first thing that I want to talk about is where you pin a piece, but the piece can actually fight back. So technically when you move this bishop to here, this bishop to this c3 square, you are technically pinning this bishop to the king. This is a pin, as in this bishop here cannot move this way, it cannot move this way, because the king would be under attack. But actually you've got to be very careful about how to pin pieces, because here this bishop can actually just take your bishop. Now of course if there wasn't just kings on the board, then that would be really bad for you because you just lost a piece. And the bishop can of course move not like a knight, move diagonally this way or move diagonally back to any of these squares should it want to. So when you're pinning a piece, usually the best ones are when the piece doesn't move the same way as it's being pinned. So for example, if this bishop here was a rook, then that would be a very good pin because the rook can't fight back, but here the bishop can fight back. Okay. Supposedly, for example, we just amend the position slightly, and let's just add a pawn on the board, and this kind of makes things a little bit easier for you. Again, though, not much really happens. We move the bishop to c3 to pin the bishop to the king, but this time if the bishop takes us, then we're able to take back with the pawn, and white should go on to win this game if they know their king and pawn endgames. But how is this actually going to be useful? So one of the main pieces that gets pinned, and it's actually useful, is the queen. So you can pin the queen with a rook or pin the queen with a bishop, and that's one great way of winning the game. So here, for example, when we move our bishop to this square, this is a really good pin, and now you're not bothered about it being a bishop and swapping off the bishops. And here if the queen takes your bishop, you can take the queen with the pawn, and if you didn't have this move in the game, then actually black would be winning with a queen up against the bishop and pawn. So this is a really good way to pin pieces that can fight back the same way as what you're trying to pin them with. Okay, let me just have get a fresh board up because there's some other things that are really important. So for example, the two different types of pins, I kind of highlighted it a little bit last time. But it's really important that we look at this. So for example, if we get to a position that looks like this, and this is something that you could see some of your games going, and this is really important to know. So for example, here we've got two pins on the board. If you can see them, great, point them out. But we've got two different types of pins, and really the first type of pin is probably one of the most important pins in the game, is when you're pinning to a king. If you're pinning to a king, this piece that's being pinned, which here is this knight, it physically cannot move. You're not allowed to touch that piece and move it. If I do this on the computer, it's going to flick it back and going to tell me, no, you can't do that. It won't even let me move it. Of course, on the chessboard, this is obviously not always easy to spot. Sometimes you miss it, you make mistakes, and you move that knight away, and then a few moves later you realise that your king's been in check for a long, long time, and you have to go back to that position and try and sort it out. So this is the first pin. Pins to the king are different to pins to every other piece. And the way that they're different is that this bishop here is pinning this knight to the queen. Now, this knight is pinned, but it is allowed to move. And this is the same as pinning to a rook, bishop, knight, pawn, whatever else. So long as it's not the king, you can actually physically pick this knight up and move it. Most of the time, it's probably not going to be a very good idea because you'll lose your queen or you'll lose a bigger piece. But there's going to be some instances, especially when we look at maybe the last video in the series of getting out of pins in special circumstances, where that's going to be quite useful. And you should always try and look at how to get out of pins. I mean, for example, here, maybe just moving this bishop to this square would actually unpin your knight. Because if a bishop takes a bishop, that's not too bad. That's going to be a fair exchange. Black could also have done it on the same side over here as well. So pinning to the king is completely different to pinning to any other piece. If you pin to the king, you physically cannot move that piece because otherwise you'd be putting yourself in check, which you're not allowed to do. If you're pinning a piece to anything else other than the king, it can move, just most of the time it's a really bad idea to do so. And remember as well that if you're pinning a piece, think about how that piece can actually move. We looked at there, pinning a bishop diagonally, probably not always the best idea because the bishop can fight back. Just like if you pin a rook along the straight lines, pin a rook with another rook, for example, well, the rook's going to be able to take you. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes not. So just have a think about how the pieces move and what you want to do. Thanks very much for watching. Yeah, click like, follow, subscribe, and wishing you every success across the board.